Adams. I'm the Deputy Chief Technologist at NASA. How many of you know what ichthyology is?
Ichthyology.
How many of you know what ichthyology is? What is ichthyology? Somebody raised his hand over here. Tell me what ichthyology is.
I have no idea. No.
Yes. Fish. The science of fish. Right. But we're not here to talk about that or NASA today. So you can stick around. I have lectures later in the week. But we have a really exciting topic about innovation and creativity, and something that probably should make all of you feel very proud to be South Africans. So what we'll do is we'll introduce Professor Bruton, and then my understanding is that he has a highly interactive quiz for you guys today that will be educational, but also an awful lot of fun. So Professor Bruton has been interested in innovation since he was involved as a former director of the J.L.B. Smith Institute of Ichthyology, which is now the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity, in encouraging his researchers to be novel and creative in their approach to science. In 2004, he developed an exhibition titled Great South African Inventions at the MTN Science Center, now the Cape Town Science Center, as part of the Science Center's celebration of 10 years of democracy. The exhibition was highly successful, and Mike was encouraged to use his research to write a book with the same title, which was published in 2010. He recently developed a new exhibition on the topic and is writing a book titled Inventions of the Rainbow Nation, to be published in 2017. Mike works as a consultant, offering expert services in the fields of aquatic research, management, authorship, Imagineering, museum and science center development, and public talks on science, technology, innovation, and the environment. He owns crazy collections of artworks. Depicting coalescent silicon. Thank you. That laundry pegs and stamps. Please give a warm Scifest welcome to Professor Mike Bruton.
Thanks very much, Jim, and welcome to all of you. This lecture is going to take the form of a quiz, where I'm going to ask you to decide who is South Africa's greatest inventor. So we're going to go through some great inventions, and I'm going to tell you about the inventors, and then at the end, I have to select 8 of them. We can't vote on all of them. And then I'm going to ask you to vote for each one, and you vote by making as much noise as you can when I mention that inventor's name. So let's practice making a lot of noise. You can shout, scream, clap, stamp. Now, play! Okay, I'm going to invite 2 members of the audience to come up in front and be my sort of volume indicators to measure who makes the most noise, or which inventor gets the most noise. Later. Right, there's some of the inventors that we're going to talk about. Do you recognize any of them? Okay. By the end of the lecture, you should know all of them. I'm sure you recognize the fellow on the bottom right, the handsome young man, Mark Shuttleworth. Right, let's start by just knowing what is an invention versus an innovation versus a discovery. Now, firstly, let's deal with the discovery. This is what most scientists are all about. They're discovering things, and I define a discovery as revealing a truth that was always there. Okay, so that's studying natural phenomena and understanding them the more we study them. So these are objects, living organisms, phenomena, and we're explaining how nature works. That's not what we're doing here. There's the coelacanth that Jim stumbled over, but these are other things that you could discover, the behavior of the sun, animal behavior, maybe a cross between a dog and a frog. The reinvention of the quokka, is that a discovery or an invention? We'll soon find out. Okay, an invention, on the other hand, is something that's human-made. It's a product or service that's new and designed and made for a specific purpose, which is useful to people and is sold in the marketplace. Okay, so it's more than just an idea. It's actually got to be something that you make, improves the quality of life. It can be high or low tech, it can be a product, a tangible thing, or it could be something on the internet, and it can be visible or invisible. Now, just for interest, the top 10 inventions of the world, according to a fellow called Philbin, were the wheel. And just for interest, I've put in the middle there a drawing that a cheeky Australian patent clerk did when he tried to patent the wheel. Imagine doing that. These are the others: light bulb, printing press, telephone, television, and so on. And not on the first 10, but number 53 is the CAT scanner, which is a South African invention. Now, an innovation I define as something that's an improvement on someone else's inventions. And many things that we call inventions today are actually innovations, because most stuff was invented a while ago, but not all of it. Now, examples of innovations, for instance, a wind-up radio. Marconi developed the radio, but wind-up radios are more recent. But this is interesting. What are language, music, art, and photographs? Are they inventions or discoveries? And I want you to think about that during the course of the talk, and we'll discuss it right at the end. Now, like all good scientists, all of you will have with you a notebook and a pencil, or at least a smartphone in which you can take notes. So I want you to take notes along the way on which inventor you're going to vote for at the end. And just to point out that every invention needs two things. Firstly, it needs that flight of fancy, that creative aha moment. It needs wings of some sort. But secondly, it also needs landing gear. It also needs to be grounded in reality. It needs to be something that we can actually use and people will potentially buy. And just to emphasize the importance of technological innovation, it's been estimated that 50 to 70% of economic growth is attributable to innovation. And if we look at the different kinds of nations there are, the competitive advantage of nations, there are three different types. The resource-driven countries that primarily depend on their natural resources, and that is the case with most African countries, their economy depending on renewable or non-renewable natural resources. Then you have investment-driven countries that buy in technological know-how from elsewhere. And then the best one to be is an innovation-driven country where you're creating the innovation in-house. Now, South Africa, is situated between 2 and 3 at the moment. And we need to get to 3 as soon as we can. Right, let's start with inventors and inventions. The first inventor I'd like to call the unknown person. And that is for the reason that in pre-colonial days, South Africans, especially living in rural areas, got to know the plants and animals, our very rich biodiversity, extremely well. They got to know the chemistry and the properties of those plants and animals, and how they could use them to make food and drink, beauty products, grooming products, agricultural fertilizers, and so on. But we don't know the names of the specific inventor. So maybe your vote will go for the unknown inventor. And for instance, the first controlled use of fire by humankind took place in South Africa, a very important invention. Along the South African coast, there are thousands of middens, which are basically kitchen refuse, showing what people ate, but also tools and sherds of pottery and so on are found in those middens. And a lot of innovation took place in those times, developing early tools. For instance, Homo habilis developing tools from stone, from wood, from shell and bone, and then eventually metal. Some examples of early creative artwork have also been found in South Africa. This is an abstract artwork called on amber, and it's scrape marks which have deliberately been made by some artist, and this is dated as 77,000 years before present. It's regarded as perhaps the earliest example of an artwork anywhere in the world. On the scientific side, the earliest mathematical device is called a Lunar Stick, found in Border Cave up in northern Zululand, 37,000 years old, It's got 29 notches cut in it, and we think it's probably counting the number of days in the month. More recently, 1,000 years before present, at Mapungubwe, the famous gold-plated rhino, they'd obviously developed the techniques for gold plating then already. And one traditional invention that is still used today is the Isifonyo thrust basket. Here you can see women on the Pongola floodplain in northern Zululand pushing the thrust basket in, and they put their hand in the hole in the top and take the fishes out. Now, because of the high diversity of plants and animals in South Africa, we've made major contributions to so-called New Age medicine. And here's a famous example of Budia, which is a succulent plant found in the Northern Cape. And sand hunter-gatherers have been eating the sap from the Budia plant, which is called bitterhop, for centuries in order to suppress thirst and hunger. And what's very interesting is the CSR has recently done research on the active ingredient in Budia and found that it has a molecule almost identical to glucose, which is one of the main sources of energy for our body. So the body is fooled into thinking that it is actually taking in glucose. Buchu is another natural plant that has now been developed for a variety of medicinal uses. And rooibos tea, which, interestingly, although the rooibos plant was used by indigenous people, its development for tea was through the work of a Russian immigrant called Benjamin Ginsberg. Benjamin Ginsberg in 1905 saw the potential for rooibos and eventually developed it into a commercial product. And of course, rooibos is now sold all over the world. It's a famous African tea. And sometimes you see Budia and rooibos combined. So the medicinal properties of both of them in one product. Honeybush tea is another example of a tea developed from an indigenous plant. Aloes have yielded a wide variety of products, and I've counted over 100 retail products now based on the aloe, from food and drink to soaps and shampoos and a variety of other things. But we don't know who the first person was to invent it. Kelp, which is that large sea plant grows under the sea off our cold west coast, has been used for centuries as a soil fertilizer, a soil moisturizer, and also for animal feed. And Kelpak near Simonstown now produces a wide variety of products. And an unusual use for kelp is to make a kind of vuvuzela, a kelpuzela, out of the kelp frond, if you want to make a lot of noise. Another good example of collaboration between the scientific sector and indigenous knowledge is the development of mosquito repellent candles. And here we have our first inventor that we can actually name, Ludwig Marishani, who was head boy at his school and calls his company Head Boy Company. He lived in rural parts of South Africa that were very dry, where water was scarce, and people didn't often get the opportunity to bath. So what he developed is something called dry bath, which is a gel that you rub on yourself and which cleans your skin, and you then just rub it off with a cloth. So you can actually have a bath without getting wet. A very innovative product. And right here at Rhodes University, Professor Tabelo Leocom is one of South Africa's highest rated research scientists. She had very humble beginnings in Lesotho, where she ran around barefoot. When she was at primary school, she used to spend one day at school and one day looking after the sheep. But she said, as far as she was concerned, it wasn't a disadvantage to her, because she proved to herself that she could do what the boys could do. Her very first ambition, she said, was to own her own pair of shoes and her own clothes, then to become a scientist. And she overcame all these barriers and is now one of South Africa's leading researchers. And one of her most important contributions is a new diagnosis and treatment for cancer called photodynamic therapy, which will hopefully replace chemotherapy. Now here's someone from Grahamstown that you may not have heard of, James Greyton. He was born in 1844. He went to St Andrews College. He then went to Bishop's in Cape Town and then immigrated to England. So we're dealing with around about the 1870s to the 1890s. He invented the apparatus that was used to drill the tunnels for the London Underground, called the Great Head Shield. He also invented a whole lot of related coring things that you could drill underground, keep the workers safe, and line the tunnel with cement. Now, he's so well known in London that there's a great big statue to him in the City of London. He's regarded as the father of the London Underground. He was also one of the first electrical engineers in the world who electrified the underground railway in England. And there you can see the Great Head Shield in action, drilling a tunnel for the London Underground. During the Second World War, South Africa was asked by Great Britain to develop radar systems to detect enemy submarines and shipping off our coast. And this was so successfully done by Sir Basil Schonlin and his Special Services group in 1939 and 1940 that the so-called JB radar transmitter that they developed here was subsequently used by Britain and the Allies in East Africa and in North Africa, because it was much more efficient in the field, smaller and more portable than the British version. One of the young members of that group who developed the early radar was someone called Trevor Wadley, and he is regarded as South Africa's Thomas Edison, because he had an absolutely brilliant mind and developed a whole lot of inventions based on radio and radar. And I've mentioned just a few of them here. The Wadley loop, the Barlow-Wadley broadband radio, regarded as the best of its kind in the world at the time. Wadley's all-wave communications receiver. These were things that were not only sort of top of their field in South Africa, but top of their field in the world. The BBC used to broadcast their radio back to South Africa on transmitters designed and made by Wadley. But perhaps his most important contribution was the tellurometer. And there you can see after the tellurometer also, after the crystal radio era passed back into transistors, he continued to develop radio systems. Now the tellurometer is a distance measuring device. Tellurometer means earth measuring. And this was at a time when distance measuring was a very tiresome and tedious procedure. It took a long time to achieve measuring a distance, say, between two hilltops. And Wadley was challenged with creating the most accurate distance measure in the world. And within 4 months, he'd done it. He created the tellurometer, which has 2 dishes, who send the radio waves to one another, and the travel time of those radio waves is used to calculate distances over tens of kilometers to accuracies of just within a few millimeters. So there's Trevor Wadley testing his prototype tellurometer, and there he is demonstrating it in England. And when he demonstrated it to the British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, the Prime Minister's response was, how come a British inventor didn't come up with this? It's so obvious, yet it's so easy. And there were world headlines praising Wadley and his group for developing that. The tellurometer came out in many different forms. Firstly, the radio tellurometers, invented by Wadley, and then later the infrared tellurometers, which are even more accurate, and were invented by another South African called Dick Olsher. There you can see tellurometers in use around the world. That's a radio tellurometer, there's an infrared one. And there in Kenya, Wales, Greenland, Canada, Switzerland, they're extensively used in the USA for surveying new road and rail systems. They've been used in Europe and in Asia for surveying new harbours and shipping lanes. And there's a map showing the triangulation for the first ever detailed map of Kenya, done entirely with tellurometers. They could also be used in aeroplanes, and there you can see a tellurometer bouncing off receiver so you can measure distances between places that you can't see. Right, let's move on. Percy Tucker was an entertainment entrepreneur in the early 50s. He wanted to sell tickets efficiently. He knew nothing about computers, so he went to his local bank, which was the only place that had a computer at the time, and developed CompuTicket, the first computerized ticketing system in the world. CompuTicket is still going strong. Mark Shuttleworth. South Africa's first astronaut, and he, as a young student in his parents' garage in Cape Town, developed the faulty internet security system, which he subsequently sold to VeriSign for $575 million. And he used part of that money to go on the Soyuz, but most importantly for us, he invented massively in informal science education and created a venture capital company called Yavi Dragons. So we can thank Mark for a lot of the informal science education that goes on in South Africa at the moment. And he's also been very keen on open source software and Linux systems, and he's created the Ubuntu system, which has facilitated access to the internet by millions of South Africans and other Africans. Up top there is Trevor Wadley, the British inventor who developed the first wind-up radio. There. That uses a clockwork system, and when South Africans looked at that, especially from the Free Play company in Cape Town, they decided that there were much more efficient ways of developing wind-up radios than a clockwork system. And a whole range of Free Play products have been developed, not only radios, but torches and also cell phone chargers, and I believe they're looking at a laptop charger as well. Another interesting invention by Capetonian Louis Liebenberg is Cybertracker, which is a combination of a palm-top computer and a GPS, and it's used for recording observations out in the field. Louis is an expert on the tracking methods of Khoisan hunters, and he used to take this in the field using icons instead of a keyboard to record their knowledge. And the Cybertracker is now used all over the world by game rangers and foresters and other people working in the field. We move on to medicine. The heart transplant in '67, probably South Africa's biggest medical accomplishment, but it's not really an invention. Our biggest invention in the medical field has been the CAT scanner, and here are the two gentlemen involved. Alan Cormack, the first nuclear physicist in South Africa, worked at the University of Cape Town and then abroad, and Godfrey Hounsfield, who worked for EMI in England. Between the two of them, they developed the CAT scanner, and they shared the Nobel Prize for it in 1976. There's a model of the prototype of a CAT scanner, which is essentially a three-dimensional X-ray device. The first X-ray taken by Willem Röntgen of his wife's hand. You can see a wedding ring and a bracelet. That's back in about 1895. And that's what a CAT scan does. It takes these sort of three-dimensional images of parts of the human body. There's a modern CAT scan. So this invention, shared by Hounsfield and Cormack, is in virtually every hospital in the world. So it really is a significant contribution. And an interesting little bit of trivia. Did you know that the Beatles, that famous pop band, their success led to or contributed to the success of the CAT scan? Because Hounsfield worked for EMI, and EMI had an entertainment division and a medical research division. And the success of the Beatles put money into the medical research division and made research on the CAT scanner possible. Another important medical invention is a cryoprobe by Percy Moyles from Johannesburg. It has a tiny tip which freezes the retina, so he's able to operate on the retina, and he famously fixed the eyesight not only of Nelson Mandela, but also of Margaret Thatcher. There's Bernard Wolff with his Optiscan Plus. This was another device for fixing problems with the retina of the eye. Diagnoser, developed by a team of doctors in Cape Town, is a portable medical kit with a variety of apparatus in it for testing basic functions, and versions of this are now on sale all over the world. I mentioned earlier the wind-up radios. Well, Dave Woods from Fortescue and others have developed wind-up medical equipment. And this is for use in rural areas where they don't have electricity, they don't have batteries, and you can wind it up and do vital tests. For instance, there's the pulse oximeter, which can determine the hemoglobin content of the blood, and therefore is a measure of the amount of oxygen that the fetus before birth is receiving, a very vital bit of information. And that's the fetal heart rate monitor. where in a pregnant mother they can measure the heart rate of the unborn baby. Now, I wouldn't vote for this man, Gerben Lubbe. He developed something called the action potential stimulation device, which is supposed to cure arthritis or at least alleviate the pain. But he's since been shown to be a con man. He's since been convicted of fraud, and in fact is currently in jail for fraud. So please don't vote for him. Right, let's move on to industrial. Dolos. A dolos is a name that's applied to the knuckle bones of a sheep, and lots of children in South Africa used to make sort of ox wagons out of those knuckle bones. The dolos I'm referring to is a breakwater protection device invented in East London by Eric Merrifield, the harbour engineer. And it's this three-dimensional interlocking device which succeeds because it doesn't block the power of the ocean, which is impossible to do. What it does, it dissipates the energy of the waves during storms and protects breakwaters, marinas, and shorelines. So that's the action of it. It's breaking the energy of the wave. The deep harbour at Cooker, called Nkweru, it relies entirely on dolosa. These 30-ton dolosa created that harbour. There have been many different designs of harbour protection devices. There's our dolos there. Some are the derivations of the dolos, and others are different. There's some other models. This is a fish artificial reef or fish attraction device. It's used in rivers in Canada. This is an anti-tank wall used in various US military operations. And these are dolos memorials that have been created around the world. It really is a product that is used in 140 countries and has made a massive difference to shore conservation. Now, South Africa has two big oil projects, Sasol and Petrosa, and within them hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of inventions have been made on how we can improve our removal of oil from coal and oil from gas. I don't have time to go into all of them, and one can't really put a name of an inventor to each of them. These are some other inventions, the jackpot prop for mine props, which allows the tension to be adjusted, the Shosholoza gumboot for mining, and the dust watch, which measures the amount of dust in the air, the direction from which it's coming, and the time of day, and plots out the dust load in the air. Kim Pratley, following on from his father George, developed Pratley products, over 800 different adhesives and putties and so on, which are made in South Africa and used worldwide. They are examples of some of their amazing products. And they have a policy in their company of constant innovation. They never stand still. And they developed what was regarded as the world's fastest glue, and they eventually had to take it off the market because people were getting stuck to it and they couldn't get unstuck from the glue bottle. Their product even went to the moon. It was chosen by NASA to go on the Ranger moon module in 1967. Another interesting product is Q20. And it got its name because the inventor, Robinson, couldn't think of a name. And when his neighbor asked him, what does it do? Well, he said, if you have 20 problems, I have 20 solutions in my Q20. So it's a multi-purpose lubricant and water repellent. The supermarket trolley called Supercart, which replaced those dinosaur-like metal ones, is a developed invention by Michael Wolff of Johannesburg. Sunsat is a development by students at the University of Stellenbosch. It's a microsatellite launched by NASA on a Delta rocket, Delta II rocket in 1999, and has been taking very high-resolution photographs of the Earth. Of course, in South Africa, we have two great astronomy projects in SALT and SKA, and there are many innovations in SALT which were made by South Africans. Probably the most significant one is a spherical aberration corrector by Derek O'Donoghue from the SAO in Cape Town. And the square kilometre array project is getting started now, but with Meerkat and the final array of dishes, many, many innovations will be developed in South Africa for that wonderful project. Up in KwaZulu-Natal, in the sugarcane belt, Irvine Bell and his sons from the 1960s onwards developed a range of sugarcane loaders and articulated trucks, which are now used in 70 countries around the world. Here's Herbert Sheffield. He was a railways engineer, and he found that the rigid rectangular chassis of the bogies under South African railway carriages was causing a great deal of wear and tear on both the metal wheels and the rails, because it was too rigid going around corners, especially on mountainous and curvy lines. So he developed a Sheffield bogie, which has a cross-strutted chassis, so that the wheels turn on the corner and there's significantly less friction and wear and tear. South Africa has also invented a range of military vehicles, mainly armoured personnel carriers, like those shown here, as well as some tanks and cannons, and significant innovations on a helicopter which became known as the Rooivalk. Recently I met the person who made the first wholly South African car, John Myers, who lives in Strand, and there's the Protea, developed in 1956, which is still a successful racing car today. There it is performing, it's a Protea Triumph at Kyalami. And they used locally made available parts as well as parts that they had turned themselves in order to create this car. There are other South African cars such as the Flamingo and the Dart, all of them high-performance sports cars. Right, let's get on to Elon Musk, born and educated in Pretoria, now naturalized US citizen. There he is as a young man, the co-inventor of the PayPal secure online paying system, which many people still use today. But he's gone on to bigger things. The Vulcan 9 rocket, the Dragon space capsule, created through his company SpaceX. And he's even envisaged a solar city which could work on Earth, but could possibly also be a place where people eventually live on Mars. So a very, very visionary man who I think we can claim having been born in South Africa. He's also developed the Tesla electric car, and I personally am delighted that Tesla's name is being perpetuated in this car, because I think he's one of the greatest scientists who's ever lived. And interestingly, Musk has also developed this Hyperloop, a supersonic capsule in a tube, which fire passengers along on a cushion of air, kind of like an air hockey puck. But he's also someone, despite his forward-looking views, who's very worried about the so-called moment of singularity, and that is the moment when computers become more intelligent than humans. Some have predicted that that could happen as early as 2025. Others say it will only happen in about 2040. But it's interesting that he is one of the people who's most worried about that. Another good South African inventor, Molala De Oyo, now based abroad. He is a technology entrepreneur who's determined to use technology to alleviate poverty and the poor quality of life that many South Africans have, especially in rural areas. He's also very much into green technology. So here we can see some of his products. Cell, which is a cementless concrete. It's concrete that's actually created from waste products, from fire burning, kilns, etc. So he's using a waste product, a pollutant that is not needed for any other purpose to create cementless concrete. He created a hydrogen-powered motorbike, a very advanced materials for protecting buildings and so on, and a testing machine to test his own inventions. South Africans have been remarkably creative in developing suction-based pool cleaning apparatus. Pool-based Kreepy Krauly barriers, all of those originated in South Africa, although most of them are now made abroad. So there's Zodiac, one of the more advanced systems, Pool Cop, which is a completely computerized system. Then let's move on to household things, Jetmaster, created by Glyn Jones. This is an example of the hex freestanding fireplace, and those familiar black bird-shaped things on top of chimneys were also invented by Glyn Jones. The Cob Cooker, developed by Ian Hall, now claimed by Australia, but we can prove it was first made here. And the Butt torch tongs, which when you squeeze them, a torchlight shines out there so that you can see you're not burning your boerewors. Okay, the beeping kettle, developed by Godogani Tamedi. This is an apparatus used by blind people, and it's designed so that when they pour a cup full of hot water, a beeper goes off just before the cup becomes full, so that they don't spill over the edge of the cup. Even the African guitar, developed from the rumpi, which was a pre-colonial guitar made from plant products. Graham Wells developed the oil can guitar, and it's been played by many famous musicians, Lucky Dube and Blue, and even Brian May of Queen used an oil can guitar. Henry Johnson, another South African inventor, now lives in the USA. He developed the speed gun, and the other apparatus that's used for measuring the speed of tennis balls, cricket balls, golf balls in sport. Gunny Vessels developed Brightweights, which is a weight system that you can distribute the weights all over the scuba diver so that he's well balanced. Dean Gerarty developed a fin system for surfboards where you can move the fins around on the surfboard depending on the wave conditions. Peter Wallinger developed the first parafoil kites that we use in this part of the world. Brian Steinobel, a well-known designer up in Johannesburg, developed the brush tee, which is used in golf courses worldwide. And he also developed golf, which is a kind of combination of golf and croquet that you can play on the back lawn. Ati and Ace Jonker developed a Revelation glider, which is unique in that it has a small engine to allow it to take off, and then you switch the engine off, and the rest of the journey is gliding. And Johan Lutz at Cape Town developed the sit-on-top kayak, the paddle yaks, which are now used all over the world and will soon become an Olympic sport using paddle yaks. Right, this is the Afri-trike, developed by Joachim Haysen, many versions of it, the Bender trike, the taxi trike, and other versions, and this is a mini grinder. The Hippo drum, developed by Jan Peltzer to make it easier for rural women to carry large amounts of water around without damaging their necks. They can pull 200 litres of water or push it in the Hippo drum. Bentley belt, developed by Mona Bentley back in 1965 as a swimming aid for young children. And the Bumbo seat, developed by Jan Breitenbach in 2001 to support very young babies whose necks need support when they're being fed. And here's a very clever one where Ronnie Stiver used a children's roundabout to work a pump, underground pump, which pumps water into a header tank. And the sponsors of this particular arrangement can be their advertising on the hoardings around there with the header tank, and the community has fresh and safe water. Now, there have been many, many other inventions that I haven't got time to mention. Bonsmara cattle, the hand-powered easy water pump, the tree popper for removing alien trees, the Giza telephone, the first push-button telephone in the world, was developed in Port Elizabeth. The Colendector, which was the first voice recorder used on the telephone, likewise developed in Port Elizabeth. We haven't got time to go into all of those. All right, now we've come to voting time. And what I want you to do is, when I call out the name of each of these 8 inventors, I want you to make a lot of noise. But firstly, I need 2 people to assist me in voting. All right? You and you. Okay.
Why? Chris, garçon.
Okay, now you're my volume measurers. Okay. And when I call out the name of an inventor, they're going to make as much noise as they feel is supporting that man or woman being South Africa's leading inventor. Okay, now just as a safeguard, I'm going to jot things down on the list as well, so that we don't slip up. All right, let's now hear it for Ludwig Marashani, the developer of dry gel. Okay, thank you. Right, let's move on now to Elon Musk of PayPal and SpaceX and Solar City and a few other things. Elon Musk. All right, how about Alan Cormack, the Nobel Prize winner who co-invented the CAT scanner? Okay, then Graham Sound's very own Tabelo Neokong, the developer of phytotherapy for cancer. Right, now let's have it for Molala De Oyo, who developed that cementless concrete and the hydrogen motorbike and so on. Right, go back into the past. What about James Greathead, the developer of the Greathead Shield for drilling the London Underground? All right, what about Trevor Wadley, the developer of the Tellurometer and radios? And finally, Mark Shuttleworth, the developer of Thought Internet Security System.
Yes.
All right. Now, my fellow adjudicators, my gut feeling is that there were two candidates who were way out in front. Do you agree? And those were Elon Musk and Tabelo Neokong. Now, are you able to separate them, or should we have another vote on that? All right, our fellow adjudicators agree that we're going to have another vote. Okay, now think carefully. You should preferably only support one candidate. Okay, otherwise there's a whole lot of noise and it means nothing. All right. So, let's start. Let's have your vote for Elon Musk. Okay, let's have your vote for Tabelo Neokong. All right, there's a clear majority for Professor Tabelo Neokong. Thank you for your vote. And thank you to the two adjudicators, and I'd like to give each one of you a miniature dolos for helping me up front here. Well, does anyone else think they deserve a miniature dolos? Civilized.
Thank you. Have you got more that you'd like to cover today? Or
Yes, I've got some more that I can go through if we have got time.
Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes, and so you can either take questions or you could hit another invention or two.
All right, just in case we had a bit more time, I've got a few more slides I'd like to go through with you. Firstly, on the basis of what you've learned today, would you regard language as an invention or a discovery? Okay, remember, a discovery is revealing a truth that was always there. So if you're saying that language was a discovery, what you're saying is it was always there, we just had to discover it. If you're saying it's invention, it's something that we made that's new.
Invention.
All right. I think we need to conclude that it is an invention.
Who made
Music.
animals?
Likewise, something new that we created. There is music in the natural world. Insects, whales, birds, frogs create music. The kind of music we create with the instruments we invent has got to be an invention. Does that also apply to fine art? Surely fine art is something created by humans that's new. Okay, and that would apply, I think, also to performing arts, to song and dance. What about photographs? Inventions. All right, so the last year we celebrated the International Year of Light. And do you know why we chose the United Nations chose 2015 as the year in which to celebrate the International Year of Light? Nothing to do with modern researchers. It's the 1000th anniversary since the publication of a book called the Book of Optics by an Islamic scientist called Ibn al-Haytham. He is regarded as the father of optics. He invented the camera obscura, the one you know here in Greyton, which led to the invention of the camera and also modeled the human eye. And he was the first person to show that light travels in straight lines, to describe how mirrors and sunset and dusk and all of that work. So photographs are also inventions. Right, with a little bit more time, what I'd like to look at is the future of inventions. Now the prediction is that most new inventions are going to be made in these fields. In the fields of space science and astronomy, in nanotechnology, in biotechnology and materials, in robotics, and in green transport. So those are the fields that are really exciting. Another very interesting field is in the field of bioprospecting or biomimicry, where we learn from nature, for instance, how spiders make such incredibly strong webs, and we try to create cables and ropes in the same way. So my challenge to you is, why don't you try to invent something? Think of something that humans would find useful which hasn't been created yet. And here's some recent examples, some rather unusual ones. A bicycle-powered lawnmower. This is a rural contribution to the SKA project. There's a canoe made out of empty plastic bottles and a moped-powered water pump. So you don't have to be high-tech to create something useful. These are more high-tech examples of some recent inventions. This is an alarm clock that you have to get out of bed and stand on to switch it off. Okay? There's a bedside cupboard which leans out as a table where you can have breakfast in bed. There's an exercise ball or computer seat. And there's a knife for cutting butter that the blade heats up. How about this? Very simple. Why didn't I think of that? A backpack which has an LED light on it, and you can say stop or go or left turn or right turn. Great aid to cycling safety. Here's some other examples: underwater viewing goggles with handles, a pack-up motorbike that you can put on your back, a suitcase in the form of a kind of a scooter. And these are called fever pajamas, which are sensitive to a baby's temperature. So if the baby's running a high temperature, the pajamas actually change color, and the mother or father immediately knows we've got a problem. What about a scooter suitcase? It folds up and be wheeled onto the aeroplane. How about some of these new inventions? Handheld video phones, ladders that walk while you're up the ladder, firefighting robots, solar cells, video postcards, surgical nanorobots, and so on. They all sound exciting. It would be great to invent them. The problem is most of them have already been invented. Okay? As far as I know, these are the only ones of that list that still need to be taken to the market, although some of them are in the prototype stage. So very efficient solar cells, video postcards, 3D conferencing, intelligent maps, and Earth orbit solar power stations. But even that is fairly advanced. All right, so those are some of the ideas that I'd like to put to you. But each of us can be an inventor. There's some people with no scientific background who become very significant inventors. You have a scientific background. You have a good education. You need to constantly be thinking of ways in which you can improve the quality of life of humans while at the same time lightening our footprint on planet Earth. I'd like to bring to your attention the book that I previously wrote on Great South African Inventions, published by Cambridge University Press, and they have developed a whole series called the Indigenous Knowledge Library, which has a variety of books on innovation in Southern Africa. And I have further information on that if you're interested. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. And here's a special, innovative, inventive gift from Scifest Africa, just for you. I think you might agree with me that you would say that the thing that limits inventions and innovation is when somebody says, no, I can't. You have to try. And you'll fail. And you won't get it right. And the rocket may take off and blow up. But if you try again, and again, and again, eventually you can change the world. Thank you, Professor Bruton, for doing this. All right. Well, if we can have the house lights, we are done. Brandon, it's a wrap.